Imagine waking up and realizing the money in your wallet is worth half of what it was yesterday. Not because of a bank failure, not because of a stock market crash, but because the government printed so much currency that the value itself began collapsing hour by hour. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January 1923 suddenly costs 200 billion marks by November. Children play with stacks of banknotes because paper is cheaper than toys. Workers are paid twice a day, racing to spend their wages before they lose value by dinner. And somewhere in this economic madness, a failed extremist movement begins gaining followers by promising order. A man named Adolf Hitler. But how did one of the most industrialized nations in the world destroy its own currency so completely? And even more unsettling, could the same pattern happen again? To answer that, we need to go back to the fragile birth of modern German democracy. In 1918, the guns of World War I finally fell silent, but peace did not bring stability. Germany's monarchy collapsed, revolution spread through the streets, and a new democratic government was formed, the Weimar Republic. From the beginning, this government faced overwhelming pressure. The biggest shock arrived in 1919 with the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty forced Germany to accept responsibility for the war and imposed massive financial penalties. Germany was ordered to pay 132 billion gold marks in reparations. Many economists at the time believed this number was economically unrealistic. But Germany had few options. Refusing payment risked military occupation. Paying meant draining an already weakened economy. The Weimar Republic had inherited what economists today might call a debt trap. And escaping that trap would lead to one of the worst monetary disasters in history. Every government has three basic ways to fund its spending. 1. Taxes. 2. Borrowing. 3. Printing money. Raising taxes after a devastating war risked social unrest. Borrowing more money became difficult because investors feared Germany might default. So the government chose the easiest solution. They started printing money. At first, this decision seemed harmless. In fact, the early inflation even appeared helpful. Debt became easier to repay. German exports became cheaper abroad. Factories continued operating. But inflation has a dangerous psychological effect. Once people expect prices to rise, they start behaving differently. Businesses raise prices faster. Workers demand higher wages. Governments print even more money to keep up. This creates a feedback loop. The more money printed, the less each unit of money is worth. Germany had entered this loop. But the true catastrophe had not yet begun. That would arrive in 1923. In 1923, Germany fell behind on its reparations payments. The Allies lost patience, so France and Belgium invaded Germany's industrial heartland, the Ruhr Valley. The Ruhr region produced much of Germany's coal and steel. Losing it meant losing the engine of the economy. The German government responded with a strategy known as passive resistance. Workers refused to cooperate with the occupying forces. Factories shut down. Railways stopped running. Millions went on strike. But there was one enormous problem. The government promised to keep paying those workers, and the government had no money. So the printing presses began running day and night. Millions of banknotes, then billions, then trillions. Germany had officially crossed the line from inflation into hyperinflation. By November 1923, the German currency had collapsed. Before the war, $1 was worth 4.2 German marks. Now it required 4.2 trillion marks to buy $1. Savings disappeared overnight. Pensions became worthless. Life insurance policies turned into meaningless pieces of paper. The German middle class, the backbone of stability in any society, was financially destroyed. People rushed to spend money immediately after receiving it. Workers demanded wages twice a day. Restaurants stopped printing menus because prices changed too quickly. One famous story describes a woman leaving a wheelbarrow full of cash outside a bakery. When she returned, the wheelbarrow had been stolen, but the money was left behind because the wood was more valuable than the cash. Before we go further, think about this for a moment. If you had lived through this crisis, watching your life savings disappear in a matter of weeks, how would you react? Would you still trust the government to fix the economy? Or would you start looking for someone else who promised a completely different system? Let me know your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy deep dives into the hidden economic stories behind major historical events, consider subscribing. These stories often explain why history unfolded the way it did. Now let's continue, because the economic damage didn't just destroy money, it changed politics. Economic collapse rarely stays economic. It becomes political. Hyperinflation created enormous anger inside Germany. Millions blamed the democratic government. Others blamed foreign powers. And many began listening to political extremists who promised simple answers. Among those voices was Adolf Hitler, leader of the Nazi Party. In 1923, Hitler attempted a coup known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The attempt failed. He was arrested. At the time, it looked like the movement was finished. But the deeper damage caused by hyperinflation remained. Even after the government stabilized the currency using the Rentenmark, the psychological trauma remained in the population. People had lost faith in the financial system. They had lost faith in democracy. And when the Great Depression struck in 1929, the country was already emotionally and politically unstable. This time, the extremists would succeed. In 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and the rest of the story would reshape the world. The hyperinflation crisis of Weimar Germany left behind lessons that still matter today. Lesson 1. Trust is the real value of money. Money is not just paper. It is a social contract built on trust. Once that trust collapses, the entire economic system can unravel surprisingly quickly. Lesson 2. Economic pain fuels political extremism. Financial crises often become political crises. Economic fear creates an audience for radical solutions and strongman leaders. Lesson 3. Short-term fixes create long-term consequences. Printing money temporarily delayed Germany's debt crisis. But the long-term cost was the destruction of public confidence. Sometimes the quick fix creates a far bigger disaster later. The collapse of the Weimar currency didn't immediately create dictatorship, but it shattered something more important than money: public trust. And once that trust disappears, societies become vulnerable to the next crisis. Which raises a difficult question for our own time. If another country faced the same combination of debt, inflation, and political anger, would we recognize the warning signs? Or would we only understand them once history had already repeated itself? If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most dramatic economic collapses in history, make sure to subscribe for more stories where economics and history collide. Because sometimes the most important lessons about the future are hidden in the financial disasters of the past.